Rome nearly fell to an African general, and history really doesn't like talking about it. This isn't just some forgotten footnote. This is one of the greatest military stories ever told, intentionally pushed to the margins. We all know about Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, and Napoleon. But what if I told you that an African commander came closer than anyone to breaking the Roman Republic, using strategies so brilliant they're still studied today? This is the story of a man who crossed mountains with elephants and brought the world's rising superpower to its knees. Before Rome became the empire we know, there was Carthage, a North African superpower that dominated the Mediterranean. And its greatest weapon wasn't a catapult or a legion, it was a general named Hannibal Barca. To understand Hannibal, you first have to understand Carthage. It was a civilization that looked at the world completely differently than Rome did. While Rome was obsessed with conquering land, building roads, and raising massive citizen armies, Carthage was a maritime empire. Its power came from trade, from ships, from controlling the flow of goods across the sea. From its capital in modern-day Tunisia, its influence stretched all the way to Spain, Sicily, and the islands of the Mediterranean. They were masters of commerce, negotiation, and naval warfare. This difference in philosophy extended to their military. The Romans prided themselves on their legions, vast armies made up of Roman citizens fighting for the glory of the state. Carthage, on the other hand, built its armies differently. They were a multinational force, composed of brilliant mercenaries, loyal allies from different North African tribes, Spanish warriors, and Gallic fighters. This wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. It meant Carthage didn't have to drain its own population for every conflict. Instead, they mastered the art of leadership, logistics, and uniting diverse groups under a single, strategic vision. Their real power wasn't just in numbers, but in strategy, alliances, and a deep understanding of psychological warfare. And nobody understood that better than Hannibal. So, picture this: Rome and Carthage are locked in a struggle for control of the Mediterranean. Rome expects the war to be fought at sea or in the lands just across the water, like Sicily. They feel secure, protected by the sea on one side and the seemingly impenetrable Alps to the north. No one in their right mind would try to attack Rome from the north. It was considered impossible. But Hannibal did what no one thought possible. He decided not to play by Rome's rules. Instead of a direct naval assault, he devised a plan so audacious, so insane on the surface, that the Romans never saw it coming. He would take the fight directly to them, on their own turf. And so began one of the most legendary journeys in military history. Hannibal gathered his massive, diverse army in Spain, a force of tens of thousands of infantry, cavalry, and, most famously, war elephants. He then marched them not by sea, but by land. He led them through Spain, across the Pyrenees Mountains, through southern Gaul, and then faced his greatest obstacle, the Alps. Crossing these treacherous, snow-capped mountains was a brutal ordeal. The army faced freezing temperatures, hostile mountain tribes, and perilous paths where men and animals fell to their deaths. Thousands were lost along the way. But this wasn't an act of madness. It was a calculated, strategic masterpiece. Hannibal knew that Rome's power wasn't just its legions. It was built onto critical pillars, its network of Italian allies who supplied troops and resources, and its reputation for being absolutely invincible. By marching over the Alps and appearing in northern Italy like a ghost, Hannibal shattered that reputation overnight. He proved Rome was vulnerable. And his entire strategy from that point forward was designed to dismantle that second pillar, Rome's alliances. He wasn't there to burn the city of Rome to the ground. He was there to show Rome's allies that there was a better, stronger horse to back. He was there to dismantle the Roman system from within. Once in Italy, Hannibal began a campaign that would terrorize Rome for over a decade. He won battle after battle, each one more stunning than the last. But his masterpiece, the battle that is still taught in military academies like West Point and Sandhurst today, was the Battle of Cannae. At Cannae, the Romans assembled one of the largest armies they had ever fielded, nearly 80,000 men, determined to crush Hannibal once and for all. They were confident, maybe even arrogant. Hannibal, with a smaller and more varied force, faced them on an open plain. What he did next was pure genius. He placed his weaker troops, the Gauls and Spanish, in the center of his line, allowing it to bow backward as the massive Roman force pushed forward. The Roman commanders thought they were winning, plunging deeper and deeper into what they saw as a collapsing center. But it was a trap. As the Romans pushed forward, Hannibal's elite African and Carthaginian infantry, positioned on the wings, didn't retreat. They held their ground. Then, on Hannibal's command, they turned inward, attacking the Roman flanks. At the same time, his superior cavalry, having already defeated their Roman counterparts, circled around and attacked the Roman army from behind. The Romans were completely surrounded. The trap was sprung. It was a perfect double envelopment. In a single day, Rome lost over 50,000 soldiers. So if he was so brilliant, why did Hannibal ultimately lose the war? The answer is complex, and it reveals as much about politics and history as it does about warfare. Hannibal was not defeated in a fair fight in Italy. He remained undefeated on Italian soil for 15 years. He was defeated by factors far from the battlefield. The Carthaginian Senate, full of rival factions who were jealous of his success and afraid of his power, failed to send him the reinforcements and supplies he desperately needed to finish the job. He was a king on the battlefield, but a pawn in the politics of his own people. Second, Rome itself was uniquely resilient. Any other power in the ancient world would have surrendered after a disaster like Cannae. But the Romans refused to give up. They absorbed the losses, raised new armies, and adopted a new strategy. They avoided fighting Hannibal directly. They shadowed him, launching guerrilla-style attacks on his supply lines and allies, a strategy that became known as the Fabian strategy. They bled him slowly, turning his own long-term occupation of Italy against him. Finally, history is famously written by the winners. Rome eventually took the fight back to Africa, forcing Hannibal to return home to defend Carthage, where he was finally defeated at the Battle of Zama by a Roman general named Scipio, who had spent years studying Hannibal's own tactics. Rome won, and they made sure their version of the story was the one that survived. They learned everything they could from Hannibal, adopted his military innovations, and then did their best to erase his legacy and paint him as a brutal monster. But the truth is, Hannibal Barca remains one of the greatest military commanders who ever lived, African or otherwise. His strategies, his leadership, and his sheer audacity changed the course of history and shaped the very way wars are fought. If his story surprises you, if you've never heard it told this way, it means that history has worked exactly as it was designed to. The winners wrote the textbooks, and they chose to leave out the parts where an African general almost brought them to their knees. But the facts remain. The genius was real. And his story deserves to be told. Thanks for watching. If you want to uncover more of the incredible African history they never taught you in school, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got a lot more stories to share. See you in the next one.